Chapter 8. Explain Bob, the pygmy goat, to me. Cynthia looked out through her glass office wall at the sea of cubicles in the center of the floor. She recalled his comment about Bob not being able to handle a stapler and wanted to know the whole story. Derek sighed and stood beside her. I shouldn't have said that. I hoped you would have forgotten it by now. Which one is he? She asked. The little guy walking with a stack of files by the potted plants? Derek didn't point. He didn't want anyone to know that they were talking about them. He's got a goatee. Other than the goatee, and he's small, I don't get it. Cynthia slanted a glance at Derek. He's a really nice guy. However, he has a bad habit of saying, hey, all the time. It sounds a little bit like a goat. He felt ashamed. Don't ever tell Bob that. Like I said, he's a nice guy. Do you have nicknames for the rest of them? Cynthia was curious. Derek sighed. Okay, if I tell you, I want you to promise you will never, ever bring this up again. You will never call any of them by their nicknames or infer anything. I like most of these people and would hate to see them unhappy with something I started. Cross my heart, pinky swear, Cynthia said solemnly. I'm serious. Derek tried to judge her response. So am I. Cynthia was a little put out by his reluctance. I promise I will never say a single word about it, except to you in private. I'll treat it as confidential. Derek knew that Cynthia took confidentiality very seriously. Okay, ever watch National Geographic? Cynthia smiled in anticipation as Derek leaned a little closer. When I was a lot younger. Derek spoke in a voice much like the narrator of the series. The pygmy goat, in his natural farm environment, interacts with many other animals. His spindly form and tiny stature makes him vulnerable. However, there are few predators in a domesticated environment. She snorted in amusement. Cynthia couldn't help herself. It was silly. The pygmy goat crosses paths with the local chicken. A female, known as a hen, she likes to cluck and squawk at times. This hen is particularly mothering and tries to adopt as many of the other farm animals as she can manage to. She also will not keep all of her eggs in one basket, scattering her progeny all over the farmyard. Derek continued. They watched as Henny left a file on a nearby table, chatting to Bob, and then walked away, forgetting her file. The brain of the average chicken is reported to be the size of a green pea. The hen's forgetfulness may be attributed to this. However, the goodwill she has distributed throughout the farm amongst the other animals through her mothering actions will assist her. Minnie grabbed the file and waddled after Henny, waving it in the air. Cynthia stared enthralled at the show going on before her. The Black Angus gives a warning as she approaches, Derek commented. Hey! Cynthia cut him off with a look of warning. Isn't that a cow? Let me finish. He watched Minnie. Her glossy coat shows her prime of health. Her beautiful lines proclaimed her heritage. Mild-mannered and curious, the Angus is a queen of her farm, a gathering for other benign and curious animals. Cynthia wasn't sure if she should be angry or not at his description. It was such a male thing to do, comparing a woman to a cow. She was a beautiful specimen. However, like her species, she tended to chew. A lot. Derek said dryly as Minnie popped a piece of granola bar into her mouth. They both watched her chew and chew. Doesn't she ever swallow? Cynthia cocked her head to the side, studying her. 50 chews minimum. It used to drive me crazy. Now I've gotten over it. Derek shrugged. Ah, the groundhog pops her head up to see if she's missing out on anything. Note the rounded cheeks, poor eyesight, and tan coloring of the hair. She is simply a regular specimen of groundhog. She chews rapidly on a piece of cauliflower as her brain processes what dangers may lurk in the field. Satisfied, she descends back to her hole. Oh my! Cynthia's shoulders shook as she clamped a hand over her mouth. She spotted Roger. Who is that? The weasel. With beady eyes and a furry twitching mustache, the weasel is generally known to be a poor guest at the farm. Usually, he steals the eggs of hens or can even harm hens. While he does have a habit of taking any offerings the hens may give him, the weasel tends to avoid her, despite her ignorance of the laws of animal nature and the danger he is supposed to present to her. The hen chases after him. Henny came forward to talk to Roger. He responded to her, but they were interrupted by Lonnie, who jumped between them, smiling. Henny and Roger abruptly left. Ah, the farm dog. A dumb and silly animal, it enthusiastically jumps in where unwanted, sniffing, licking, and smiling. It generally annoys the other farm animals, Derek repressively muttered. No one likes him? Cynthia asked, sensing a dislike for Lonnie. You'd have to interact with him to understand why, Derek said repressively. If you don't have to subject yourself to that experience, I wouldn't. They watched Lonnie skitter away as Mr. Stone Sr. walked by. Who is he? Cynthia drew Derek a sly look, daring him to impugn her uncle. Farmer Stone. His presence drives all of the farm animals to behave. Derek didn't think it would offend her at all. See them scatter and be busy? She laughed. And who are you? I haven't figured that out yet. He shrugged. When I do, I'll let you know. Okay. She looked at him, amused. Who am I? My boss? Derek grinned at her. But you've given me an animal nickname. Cynthia was certain of it. What is it? You are a dragon, he admitted. You swoop around the farm once in a while, terrifying all the little animals in your glory as you make your demands. You're sleek, impressive, and nearly immortal. Wow, she blinked. I'm not sure I live up to that. Well, I'm finding that you've got a softer side lately, Derek mentioned. I might have to revise your status. And what is Jameson? Cynthia had to know. A pig, Derek said promptly. That was pretty accurate on most accounts. Yet you say you haven't named yourself. She didn't believe him. Derek rolled his eyes. I'd like to be a fox, but I'm afraid I'm just not that cunning. Oh, I don't know. Cynthia looked him over. I think there may be much more to you than meets the eye. She was giving him all sorts of sexy signals, but Derek knew they were on display since the walls of her office were made of glass. As much as he might want to make a move, he shouldn't. Bob timidly knocked on Cynthia's door. Derek was glad for the interruption. The more time he and Cynthia were spending together lately, the harder it was to keep his hands to himself. It didn't help that she was actively encouraging him. Derek opened the door. Hey, Bob. Hey. Bob looked from Derek to Cynthia. Hey, Mr. Jameson wants to see you about a case, Miss Stone. Hey, an appeal has been filed against his clients, and you've been involved in the case before, acting against them. I hope he isn't going up against any of my clients, Cynthia frowned. That would be in violation of the rules of the firm. Hey, no, ma'am. Bob shook his head. I believe the appeal is in regards to another child. Oh, Cynthia was mollified by his response. Lead the way. Hey, Bob retreated. Cynthia paused by Derek for just a moment and ran a hand along his arm before following Bob. Derek took a deep breath to steady himself. Instead, he caught a whiff of Cynthia's perfume. This was not good. They couldn't continue like this at work and not expect someone to notice. It was his job on the line. Not that he particularly loved his job, but it was the only one he had. Derek rejoined the cubicle farm, and Minnie immediately came over to him. Operation Jill and Lonnie is a huge success, she whispered excitedly. Lonnie has just gotten tips to woo her from Roger. He's going to chat her up in the copy room. Roger giving out advice on dating? Probably not Lonnie's ticket to success, Derek mused. He shrugged internally. It really wasn't his problem. Cool. Just remember, we want to be a little subtle. Encourage him, but don't let him think we're all conspiring against him. Right, Minnie nodded seriously. Absolutely. This is exciting. Derek had to smile as she went back to her own tasks. Who knew everyone could pull together like this? Merle popped up, scanning the room with a militant gleam in her eye. Seeing nothing important, she descended into her cubicle again. Derek briefly wondered what was going on. Merle seemed a little more purposeful than her regular scattered self. With a sigh, he dismissed it. He had work to do. A half an hour later, he was deep into revising a document when the atmosphere in the room changed. Derek? Merle's voice quaked with determination as she announced too loudly, "Could I use your stapler? Mine is broken." "Sure." Derek frowned as he handed her his stapler. She was peering past him as she accepted it. Derek sat down and leaned back so he could see out of his cubicle opening. Sure enough, there was Lonnie coming back from the elevators. Did Merle just warn the group that Lonnie was approaching? Minnie had called it Operation Jill and Lonnie. Were things getting out of hand? Derek hoped not. He didn't want to have to put an end to their fun. Lonnie approached Roger in his cubicle, and everyone in the farm cocked their ear to try to overhear what was being said. Derek shook his head. If Lonnie were bright enough, he'd realize what they were doing. Derek would have to take the group to task and tell them to mask their interest in Lonnie's love life a little better. Disappointingly, Derek was too far away to hear what Roger and Lonnie were talking about, but he could see Bob making little nods as the conversation continued. He tore his attention away from the spectacle and got back to work. Lonnie left to get some water from the water cooler. Not able to take it anymore, Derek got up and followed him. He slapped Lonnie on the shoulder. "Hey, Lonnie, how are things going?" Derek grabbed a paper cup and waited as Lonnie got his water. "Great," Lonnie nodded enthusiastically. "Do you happen to know anything about Jill from the copy room?" "Jill?" Derek pretended to think. "Is she one of the new interns?" "Nah, she runs the place," Lonnie said. "She's kind of cute." "Really?" Derek shrugged like it made no difference to him. "I'll have to take your word for it, because I barely see anyone when I go down there. Usually Missy would take care of getting copies, but until I get the new PA situated, I've been doing it." "Oh, yeah." Lonnie waved his water around, splashing Derek with it. "Did you get someone?" Derek smiled and ignored the drips on his suit jacket. "Finally, yes. Hopefully it will make life a little easier." "Cool." Lonnie waited as Derek got his drink of water. "A guy like you would have some good tips on how to get the girl, right?" "A guy like me?" Derek gave Lonnie a puzzled look. "You know." Lonnie gave Derek a fake punch on the shoulder. "A player." "A player?" Derek almost snorted. He hadn't dated anyone in 8 years. He'd barely had 2 dates before college. He had nightmares that made his college girlfriends dump him and call him a freak. The only woman he'd made any moves on lately was his boss. "Well," Derek said slowly, "you need to find out what she likes. Ask the ladies she works with. Find out more about her, and then you can suggest you do those activities with her. Maybe you'll find out she likes to do something that you like to do, or at least pretend to like to do. It gives you something in common to talk about." "That's a good tip," Lonnie nodded, thinking about it. "I never thought of it that way." Which was probably why he was such a loser extraordinaire. Lonnie didn't much think about anyone except himself. If he were left to his own devices, he'd say something crude to Jill and it would be all over in 10 seconds flat. "Just treat her like a lady." Derek gave Lonnie a pat on the shoulder. "I need to get back to work." "Thanks for the advice," Lonnie said as he went back to his cubicle. Lonnie thanking him in a sincere manner? This day was getting more interesting by the minute, Derek thought. "Triple latte mocha, heavy on the whipped cream, with 1 shot of caramel and a German eclair." Nelson set the food down on Cynthia's desk. "What?" Cynthia frowned as she looked at him. "Who are you?" "Nelson?" He frowned back at her and pushed up his glasses. Cynthia stared at him. "I don't understand." "I'm your new PA." He held out a hand in greeting. "I didn't order a new PA," Cynthia scowled. She had ordered a new PA, she just hadn't expected Derek to get her one so soon. Nor had she expected her PA to look like this. Nelson scratched his head. "Well, Derek hired me for you." She wondered if he had head lice. If he did, he would have to go. Cynthia was not going to go through her children's hair with lice comb and mayonnaise. "Get Derek for me." "Yes, boss." Nelson nodded and exited the office. Cynthia wondered if he was serious or if he'd been flippant with the "yes, boss." With his nasal tone and deadpan expression, it was hard to tell. A few minutes later, Derek entered. She offered the chair across her desk with a gesture. I see you met your new PA. Derek grinned. He's got loads of experience, has great recommendations, and I like his personality. Cynthia raised an eyebrow. Derek sighed in disappointment. What's wrong with him? He got the order correct, right? He did, she allowed. He's just... What? Derek frowned at her. He's a neat guy. He needs the work. Did you take the time to get to know him, or just judged him right away? I'm not sure I like him. Cynthia fiddled with her pen, leaning back in her comfortable chair. You just sprung him on me, and I don't think I like that sort of surprise. Well, you could have gone through the effort to hire your own PA, Derek pointed out. He's right here now. Give him a chance. Fine, she growled, but you owe me. How can I possibly owe you? I hired the guy for you. Derek groused back. If anything, I should be getting my own PA for everything I do. Cynthia rolled her eyes. You're not that busy. We didn't even take the last 3 cases that were offered to us. Daycare runs to pick up and drop off the 2 sprites, dinner and homework duties, cleaning, since the concept seems to be foreign to you. Have you learned any cooking yet? He asked pointedly. I just started the class. Cynthia glared at him. We haven't gotten very far. Make sure you actually learn something to impress Mr. Davidson, our caseworker, with. Derek sighed. We still need to cut back on work. How? Asked Cynthia a little sarcastically. Pretty soon we'll be doing the bare minimum that the firm allows for junior partner. Maybe you need to step down. Derek threw the idea out. I am not stepping down, Cynthia said firmly. She drew in a sharp breath at the thought. I worked too hard to get to where I am. Well, we can't cut back on time with the kids, Derek responded, and I need to sleep before I crack. You could sleep over, she made her new favorite suggestion. It would save you at least an hour's commute. In which I work. Derek rubbed his face with a hand. I get maybe 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night. I need to figure out a way to get 2 to 4 more hours free so I can finally sleep like a normal person. Maybe you need to organize yourself better, Cynthia shrugged. She felt like she was getting enough sleep, although she would get less if Derek would just take her up on her offer. Not helpful, he glared at her. She sighed. He was looking more frazzled lately. Not that he wasn't still performing well work-wise and doing good with the kids, but she could see that the lack of rest was wearing on him. We will figure something out. You're keeping the PA, Derek said. I can't keep doing my work, a PA's work, and help with the kids. You need a PA, and I need to lighten my workload. Fine, Cynthia rolled her eyes. I'll keep the PA. Good. Derek stood up. He's a nice guy. Give him a chance. I said okay, she repeated with a pout. Send him in, and I'll put him to work. Derek gave her a tired smile. Thanks. She watched him leave. He looked so good in that suit. She wondered what he would look out of it. The idea was replaced as Nelson came in. You wanted to see me? He adjusted his glasses. Cynthia sighed. Enough daydreaming. Yes, why don't we have a seat and we'll get started. A full day of Nelson later, Cynthia had to admit he knew how to do his job. Nelson was just a little odd, in her opinion. Perhaps it was because she was used to cowing most people into doing her bidding, and it didn't work with him. He just didn't seem afraid of her at all. He was just efficient in a nasally, glasses-adjusting, holding onto his briefcase like the world might end if it wasn't in his possession sort of way. She didn't know where Derek had found this guy, but he had certainly gotten his revenge over Cynthia making Derek hire a PA. The briefcase thing was driving her batty. Cynthia looked for a way to get Derek to herself without drawing too much attention. He deserved a little reciprocation for hiring Nelson. It took nearly an hour between working to figure out and lay her trap. As soon as she saw him leave the cubicle farm, she nonchalantly headed out to ambush Minnie. Have you seen Mr. Kramer? Minnie blinked at being addressed by Cynthia. Usually Ms. Stone never spoke to anyone in the cubicle farm except for Derek. He just went down to the copy room. Thanks. Cynthia gave her a thin smile before heading to the elevators. Perfect. The copy room was en route to where she needed Derek to be. She couldn't have set this up better if she'd sent him there herself. On the copy room floor, she talked nicely to the maintenance staff supervisor and received a key. It was all too easy. Cynthia grabbed Derek on his way back from the copy room and hauled him into a janitor's closet. Derek stared at her in open-mouthed surprise as she shut the door behind her, locking it, showing off the key. Do you know how difficult it is to get a key to the janitor's closet? Derek snapped his mouth shut. No idea. It's very easy. She grinned, then pulled on his tie, looping an arm around his neck to kiss him. She melted into him, enjoying the sensations of what his touch brought to her. He was a fine kisser. He tasted like a sprinkled donut. Not that she was particularly partial to those, but he was tasty. Maybe she could get him to switch to German eclairs. He lifted his head and looked at her. This is a bit of a surprise. A nicer surprise than my new PA, she responded. Ah, so this is what it's all about. Well, partly about. Cynthia trailed a finger down his shirt. I have to say, the nasal voice, the deadpan expression, the constant adjusting of the glasses, Nelson is very interesting. Derek grinned. He's slightly annoying, you mean. However, he's good at his job. Good enough that you can probably overlook those idiosyncrasies. He is good at his job, Cynthia allowed. So far, he had excelled at everything she'd given him for tasks. However, there is one thing that is killing me about Nelson. What's that? Derek asked curiously, enjoying holding her close. The briefcase, Cynthia huffed. He holds onto it like it has national secrets in it. Derek couldn't stop himself from grinning. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Cynthia gave him a small slap on the chest. You hired him because of it. Hey, I want to know what's in the briefcase, Derek explained. If I didn't hire him, we would never find out. She sighed. This should not be a priority. It isn't, Derek shrugged and smiled. Yet if we happen to find out... What harm could there be? Cynthia leaned up a little. Exactly, Derek said before he kissed her again. There was a noise behind her which had Cynthia quickly jumping out of his arms. Derek cleared his throat. We could probably use these sides of bags. That'll be fine. Cynthia watched him grab a handful as the janitor looked at them suspiciously. Yes, that would work. She stepped past the janitor, head held high. Derek gave the man a nod. Dude, the janitor said quietly as he tugged on Derek's suit. Might want to wipe the lipstick off. Derek could feel himself flush. Thanks. Any time. The janitor gave him a wink and pushed his cart into the room. Derek ran a hand over his face, hoping to remove the worst of the lipstick. He'd have to see himself in a mirror to be sure he got all of it off. He still had the silly bags in his hand. Derek ducked into the first-floor washrooms to check himself out in the mirror. He threw the bags into the trash. There was a smudge of pink. Derek quickly wiped it off. Either Cynthia had to get a different makeup, or they had to stop doing this. Who was he kidding? They had to stop. At least at work. Maybe altogether. Derek ran a hand through his hair and debated what he was going to do. Deciding that delaying the inevitable was a bad idea, he made his way to Cynthia's office, where she had just already reapplied a generous measure of lipstick and looked entirely calm at her desk. It irked him a little. She should feel as off-kilter as he did. He plopped into a chair without an invite. We need to stop doing this. Doing what? Cynthia ignored him as she signed forms. Ducking into elevators and janitors' closets, Derek said firmly. At some point, we are going to get caught. I think it's fun, Cynthia gave him a saucy smile. Is it going to be as much fun when I get fired and you get a discipline hearing? Derek asked dryly. You're such a spoil sport. Cynthia sighed and set down her pen. What do you propose? As much as we both enjoy these little interludes, we need to stop it at work. He hesitated before adding, we probably shouldn't do them in front of the kids either. Well, that pretty much covers 90% of our day except for our sleeping moments, Cynthia frowned at him. Unless you want to sleep with me. Derek swallowed hard. I do, but that's not going to happen just yet. Again, you need to set an example for the kids. Plus, I don't think Mr. Davidson would like us cohabitating. Cohabitating? She liked the idea. You're much better with the kids than I am. If anything, this ought to be considered a brilliant idea. It benefits us all. Do you really think your caseworker is going to see it that way? Derek pointed out. Fine, Cynthia growled. However, what does that mean for us? Is there an us? He asked. For some reason, her answer seemed very important to him at the moment. There'd better be. Cynthia leaned back in her chair, playing with her pen. I don't know about you, but now that this thing between us has started, I have no intention of stopping it. She had a lot of intentions, mostly to snag Derek and make him hers, and when Cynthia wanted something, she generally got it. You know what this means, don't you? He asked quietly. What? Cynthia tilted her head and enjoyed just looking at him. She'd always been a little attracted to him. Lately, as much more than a little. She was falling for the person she was learning about, the Derek that she had never known, the man who was always there for her and now for her nieces and nephews as well. If neither of us intends to stop, then I need to find another job, Derek said logically. Hold on a moment. Cynthia scowled. She didn't like this idea one bit. I like you working for me. The firm has strict policies, Derek reminded her. We signed agreements. We're lawyers, Cynthia pouted. We can find a loophole and exploit it. Derek had a rueful chuckle. She was worried about losing him, so she'd finally promoted him to something she didn't even have the power to promote him to. It was better than her saying he was only her assistant, he supposed. A whole team of lawyers put the agreement together. I'm sure it's infallible. Nothing is infallible, she stated stoutly. I'll find the solution. The solution is to have me work somewhere else. Your entire career is here, he said reasonably. Then I can take you out to dinner and other public functions without worrying about running into any of the office staff. I want that too, she admitted. Derek got up. I'll go brush off the resume. Don't worry, I'll find an appropriate replacement before I go. It won't be the same, Cynthia said somberly. No, he agreed. It will be better. She would hold him to that promise, she thought as she watched Derek leave her office. Derek sat down at his desk. For the first time in a long time, he didn't want to quit. He was enjoying working for Cynthia. He enjoyed kissing her more. That meant if they were going to give this a shot at a real relationship, he was going to have to find a new job. He put job search on his already overloaded list of things to do. He would never find anything with as good a pay as this. Derek sighed. Well, maybe he'd get better hours and vacation days that he was actually allowed to use. There was something to be said for having time to relax and have a personal life. Especially when his personal life was about to include Cynthia. Derek! Lonnie hung his arms over Derek's cubicle, flashing him a crooked smile. I was thinking for Valentine's Day of maybe asking Jill for a double date. Would you be interested? In a double date? With Lonnie as one of the participants? And Jill, queen of the copy room? He'd rather dip himself in acid. Derek shook his head regretfully. Lonnie, I'd love to, but you know, Miss Stone, I never have any time off. First in the office, last out, always got the nose to the grindstone. Lonnie laughed and winked. We all know how she keeps you busy, Derek. Derek paused and looked at Lonnie. Did Lonnie mean what Derek thought he meant? Our relationship is purely professional. Yeah, right. Lonnie winked again. Don't worry, I'll keep it under wraps. Great. That meant he'd be spreading it far and wide. Hopefully no one would pay any mind to Lonnie and his lewd tongue. You've been having luck with Jill, then? Not really. Lonnie frowned in contemplation. She's a prickly one. Bob said she turned down her last boyfriend for 3 months until she went out with him. Bob said that according to the last guy, she was worth the wait. I heard that. Derek nodded sagely. He said she was amazing. Really? Lonnie smirked. I'm surprised you haven't tried. Then again, you've been busy. Oh, no. Derek shook his head with an innocent expression. I think Jill is just too much woman for me. Maybe you should think twice on what you might be getting yourself into, Lonnie. Too much woman? Lonnie scoffed. There's no such thing for me. I don't know, Derek shrugged. I heard the last guy. What? Lonnie leaned forward, entranced. It really wasn't a nice thing to say, nor was it fair to Jill. However, it might keep Lonnie from spreading rumors about Derek and Cynthia, which Derek wanted to protect her from any disciplinary action. He leaned over to Lonnie and whispered, "Expired. In bed." Lonnie's eyes bugged out. "She's that good?" Derek shrugged and let Lonnie think whatever he would. "Whoa," Lonnie breathed. "I'm going to order up one of those big chocolate heart packages. I hear women like those things." "That's an idea," Derek remarked mildly. Lonnie nodded and headed off on a mission. Derek leaned back in his chair and struggled with his conscience. He was probably a bad guy for leading Lonnie down this road. He rubbed his tired eyes and sighed. Minnie knocked on his cubicle to get his attention. "Decorating committee." "Huh?" Derek looked at her blankly. "To boost company morale in the lower orders, it has been decreed that we shall decorate all non-senior staff workplaces for each major holiday." Minnie held out a glittery streamer of red hearts. "I give you decorations for Valentine's Day and tape." Derek blinked. Isn't that depressing for everyone who's single, or anyone that is forced to work through the holiday due to the work schedule of their boss? "Stop that nonsense." Minnie scowled at him. "Get cozy with the romantic holiday and put up some sparkle." "You just want to bedazzle my cubicle," he accused her. "And everybody else is," she readily agreed. "It took me 2 weeks of petitioning to get the higher-ups to agree to this, so don't be a spoilsport." Derek sighed. He didn't want to ruin her fun. "Fine, glitter away." Minnie gave a little excited squeal. She shoved her way into the cubicle. "I think over here I'll put the hearts. Old Cupid himself, he should go over in this corner." Derek was squashed into a corner. He couldn't move as Minnie pressed up against him to tape another piece of decoration to his cubicle wall. "I could do errands and let you at it." "Don't worry, I'll be done in just a moment," she said as she turned. Derek pushed his face against the cubicle to avoid having it right in her posterior. "I just have one more." He sincerely hoped it was only one more. Derek was starting to feel claustrophobic. "There." Minnie smiled happily and squeezed her way out of the cubicle. "All done. Isn't it great?" Derek looked around his previously bare and utilitarian cubicle. It had been transformed with dancing cupids, glittering hearts, and a small vase of fake red roses. It was an assault on the eyes. "Yeah, great. What am I supposed to do with the pack of cards you left on my desk?" "Those are for you to write nice messages on and hand out to your coworkers," Minnie proudly answered. "We're going to give Valentines just like we did when we were kids." "I never gave Valentines as a kid." Derek eyed the pack of cards. The box had a goofy-looking mouse holding up a heart. "You must have broken a lot of girls' hearts," Minnie tutted. "They were waiting on a Valentine from you and were disappointed." "I highly doubt that." Derek didn't believe it for a second. He'd been a miserable child. The girls had probably been relieved that he had stayed far away from them. "Speaking of love," Minnie drew out the word with relish, "Lonnie got Jill to agree to go out on a double date with him. I don't know if his constant attention wore her down, or if she thinks she's being set up to go out with Roger. And Lonnie is bringing Henny, but they're all going to a restaurant and then to see a movie." "You're kidding me." Derek couldn't believe it. He stared at Minnie. "For real?" "For real," she giggled delightedly. "Love is in the office. Watch out, Derek. You might catch the bug next." Derek leaned back in his chair to ponder that bit of gossip as Minnie waltzed away to bedazzle and glitter the next unfortunate soul's cubicle. "Well, I'll be." Derek allowed a smile to creep across his face. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this chapter, please look for the next chapter of Sweet Valentine. Also, please share this video for others to find it. This is free for you and would really help me grow my audience with the algorithms. Thank you. Also, you can find Sweet Valentine and other books by Josephine Beintema at Amazon. They're in ebook, paperback, and on Kindle Unlimited.